Hi there, everyone. I'm Stacy Schroeder, your Regional Director for the Institute for Management Studies. I'm so excited to be here to have this awesome interview between Kathy Felong, who is the Vice President of Strategic Communications, Culture, and Change Management at Erie Insurance, with Dr. Louise Kelly, who is leading a custom program just for Erie employees and leaders on May 15th from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time over Zoom. I'm so excited for this conversation. I hope you get a little bit of insight about Dr. Kelly and why we're so excited to have her as part of this series this year, and hope to see you there. I'll let you take it away, Kathy.
Thanks, Stacy. And I will just echo what Stacy had to say. Very excited to have you. We love to bring in outside perspectives here at Erie. And of course, as the head of strategic communication, you're talking about when we get leaders who talk about anything strategic. I'm especially excited because I think it's just so that capability of strategic thinking is critical to every aspect of business. So anything that we can do to help our leaders and employees develop that is great. So very excited to hear what you have to share with us, Dr. Kelly.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about what you're going to be sharing with us. What actually do we mean by strategic thinking? And what makes it worthwhile for us to learn about that?
No, that's an excellent question, Kathy, and great pleasure to be with both of you this morning here in LA, this afternoon, I believe, on your end. Yeah, I'm sure you get that question a lot, right? What is this strategy thing? And I think that part of my job is to demystify strategic thinking, to be that kind of coach, that encourager to get people to sort of jump right into that. Because as we were saying earlier in an earlier call with Jackie, your colleague, strategy sounds like such an abstract concept, right? So, and it's like people are like, well, it's like this, and I think part of the fear is you can go so wide with strategy, right? Because there's so much going on in the world, and it's like, well, should I be thinking about AI? Should I be thinking about this? Should I be? Where do I start? And that's what I'm here to help people with the strategic thinking is, okay, where do you start? And strategic thinking is different from strategic planning. And that's something that we will clarify when we do the training. There are two different concepts, bit of a yin and yang, right? You need both, absolutely. You do need the plan, but the strategic thinking is more got to do with things that people can do at the individual level rather than, let's say, C-suite is doing that. You've worked with many of the CEOs at Erie, and they have a heavy responsibility with the strategic planning. The buck stops with them to like, here's the direction we're going. But if they're good, and I'm sure they are, is they have to be listening to those who have their finger on the pulse, who maybe are closer to the customers sometimes, who have that direct contact. It was interesting. I ran into a pilot last week. She's retired now. She was a commercial pilot. She's 85, looks fantastic. And she was telling me about automatic pilot. And she said, when people think, you put on automatic pilot and then, just look out the window and it's just a steady course. But actually 90% of the automatic pilot is in adjustment mode. So it's not like you just, chart this course and we're good. Constantly adjusting to the winds, the mountain ranges, all of those micro changes. And so I would see the strategic planning, strategic thinking like that. You have the big plan, your destination, the CEO and the top management team and yourself, I'm sure, intimately involved in doing that. But then there's that day-to-day adjustment with what's going on in the world, and things are changing so quickly. So that's one of the ways I like to think about strategic thinking, is really that's something that, my brand as a consultant and a trainer in this strategy area is really about bringing in people at the lower levels in the organization to feel empowered to do this strategic thinking. One of the traditional kind of metaphors for it, and I think it still really applies, is the idea of chess to some extent, where you're looking at the chessboard, you're looking at the big picture. Strategic thinking means you always have to get out of, I like to call it the goldfish bowl of your, your office and your workers that your coworkers that you're involved with on a daily basis. You have to kind of rise above and sort of look around at the big picture. What is going on the chessboard? And really what's important there is that you become somebody who's part of that process rather than being a chess piece that's getting moved around. So that's, I think, a very good metaphor. I could go on, we
Yeah.
always have more ideas, but if
Yeah.
you have more questions, I have a few other ideas on that if you'd like me to keep
Yeah,
going.
I think so much of that makes sense. When from a communication perspective, I like to share with people, and having been here for a long time, how important it is to think about context
Mm,
in any situation, because facts or information don't live in a vacuum. They're in context. And
mhm.
I think once you understand context or looked at context, then that is necessary to then do strategic thinking. Okay, now that I understand the whole picture, now what do I do next? And
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on that if you don't mind, Kathy. I like that idea of context. And, Stacy and I have talked about some of the tools that I would be planning to bring to this training. And I'm open to if there's some other things that you want us to look at. But my approach to strategy is really this kind of toolbox, right? So you've got this abstract concept of strategy, but how do I get started? How do I get, dip my toe in the water basically to really do some of this? And one of the things I love to start with is Porter's Five Forces. It is a chestnut. It's been around since the 80s. It still works. And it goes exactly to what you're saying, the context. How is the dynamic between the customer power? It's all about relative power. That power is changing all the time. One of the things that we'll be delving into is the idea that across all industries, and certainly in the insurance industry, the customer's power is increasing. Now, for customers, we love it because we know more, but we're more demanding, right? And if we
right.
have something in a different industry that they're doing, we're coming to the insurance industry and saying, hey, well, my app does this for me. My app reads that for me. Why am I not, I'm taking a picture when I'm have an insurance problem and uploading that straight away. I want you to be in that world. So the customer is very demanding, and that can seem overwhelming, but it's also a wonderful opportunity. So looking at those relative dynamics, what's going on with the suppliers? What's going on with the competitors? Wait, what's the substitutes for insurance? What are different options? We know the younger generation is looking at things very differently.
Right.
So I love that context. So we start with that, and that gets people's, you know, confidence up because your people know your customers. Your people know your industry. So, and that's the beauty of doing what Stacy refers to as, this customized, lightly customized training, because we can do a deep dive. I don't have to give
Yeah.
an example of the pharmaceutical industry, which is very interesting, but we can, hey, let's just do a deep dive on your industry. So context is absolutely where we like to start. And it's, Porter's Five Forces, it's really the lay of the land. You may want things to be different, but you know what? There's this big mountain right there, and you got to figure out how you're going to get over that or across that river, whatever metaphor you have from the landscape.
Yeah, there's so much of what you're talking about really connects with a lot of things that we are discussing at every level, but certainly at the executive level on down with leaders. I'm thinking of the importance of change management,
Mhm.
and that we are in a situation where we have change upon change upon change, change in how we work, change in how in the customer appetite, as you just pointed out, change needed to legacy platforms.
Mhm.
And all of these are things that can't wait. So they're happening in overlapping ways. And one of the capabilities, in fact, it's the one that our executive team identified that we want to focus on this year as part of our collective enterprise goal, is nimble learning.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
how much of this goes with, and especially in a legacy company like Erie, insurance is a very conservative and traditional industry. And that's certainly true of our company as well. So even though we've got newer people, we're embracing new ways of doing things, but it still is a big change. And so for us to really embrace something like nimble learning and adapting to changes in the economy, changes in society, changes in technology, all of that is so necessary. How do we help people not, and I'm not sure if this is within your realm, but
Sure.
how do we, even using something like strategic thinking, how do we help our leaders and employees not get overwhelmed by the proliferance of changes and the needs? We need strategic thinking everywhere, but you also have to prioritize and in order to get things done.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think, Kathy, that is where the other part of your title comes in, which is the culture piece, right? So how do you create a culture? And on the earlier call, when we were talking with your colleague, Jackie, we were talking about the importance of collaboration and innovation. And again, that's really kind of my brand, the collaborative approach. And folks will learn more about that in the training of how you really support people in that. And there is a vulnerability to what you're talking about. And, one of the examples in industry that I really admire, and perhaps you've been following this, I think maybe we've all been following it, is what's going on in Microsoft right now. And they have, things are going to change in a year from now, but right now they're sort of the king and queen of the AI world, right? And they came out strong, and everybody thinks, Satya Nadella, who is the CEO, made a really big investment with OpenAI, and they won big, right? And so I think it was a $10 billion investment, perhaps. But I want to talk about what's it look like in the culture of Microsoft? So when you had that transition, Bill Gates, great leader, but very competitive, very, very competitive. Well, competitive and collaborative are not always the same thing, right? They can be orthogonal to each other, at odds with each other. There's a big academic word, threw it out there. Got to earn my PhD chops here. So, but, Satya Nadella came in, and he's well known as a kind of humble approach in terms of his, and you're seeing more of that in leadership. I'll talk about that in our training as well. You're seeing more of the introverts leading, and doing very well, especially post-pandemic. And he came in and he instituted something called the growth mindset. And you might have heard of the growth mindset. So, the fixed mindset is, that's just the way it is. I'm not good enough to do this or that. And that's sometimes resistance to change. I'm not going to about to learn this new system, and this AI is going to take my job, whatever it is, right? And Satya Nadella said, no, we're going to have a growth mindset. And what that's going to involve, every meeting that he was at the end of the meeting, he'd say, how did we do with our growth mindset? Because for somebody to do this growth mindset, you have to talk about what you got wrong. You have to talk about where you missed the mark. You had this goal and you weren't quite able to achieve it. And it also involves, and I think this is something that was super important at Microsoft in that shift from the competitive to the collaborative mindset, was my goal is not to make other people look bad. Now, I know, Erie, that's not your brand, but my goal is to share my challenges and to learn from each other. And that takes some of that, kind of braving that we've been hearing about, where you're willing to take off, your kind of armor and be willing to say, I don't I haven't got this figured out, I haven't really like wrapped my head around it. And one of the things I like to say when doing strategy with, middle managers, etc., is I like people to think about saying, here's my best thinking on this. So it's like, yeah, I do have some ideas, but they're kind of half-baked because it's coming at me so fast. So here's my best thinking. Where am I getting this wrong? What am I missing here? Right. And then that kind of opens up that flow of conversation. So I think a lot of that, I'm just going to mention one piece of research I did. It's an article. I could send it to you, Kathy, because you're in the mix with this stuff. And it looks at transformational leadership and innovation. And what we found was really interesting. We found that the CEO had a direct influence through the transformational leadership in driving innovation. However, we found out something very interesting, which relates a lot to your position. When it came to a certain type of innovation, which is those sort of blockbuster products, like the more edgy innovation, right? The less safe, okay? We call it exploitation and exploration. So the exploration type, where it's like you're coming out with this kind of bold new idea. That was driven more by the culture than the CEO. So the CEO's transformational leadership translates more directly into the iPhone, what are we at, 14 or whatever we're at, right? Just that tweaking of a great, product. What drives the exploration, those really, wow, you're creating something new that other people, is the culture. It is a culture where people like Satya Nadella created, where people are willing to say, this is my best thinking, haven't got this figured out. How do you see this? And it also involves listening to other people, right? And this is where the introverts do great, because it's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's
Right.
about, tapping into the expertise of your team, I don't like to say, leader and followers. I like to say coworkers. Because depending on the issue, they could be up here with their expertise. And so those are some of my thoughts about how the resistance to change, it's bolstering that culture. And I think with something like this training, where my approach is really giving the folks at Erie a toolkit, right? So the two tools we're going to focus on, unless there's other ones you want us to focus on, are going to be Fortis 5 Forces, really getting that context, the lay of the land. What's the power dynamic? How is it shifting? And then the second thing we're going to look at is the blue ocean strategy. And that is where you see the first one, the context, it's not passive at all, but it's sort of saying like what's out there already, right? And kind of like, how do we position ourselves relative to that? Now, blue ocean goes a step further, and it's like, hey, what can we do that's totally different from what's out there already? So we're no longer in that, red bloody ocean, but we're in this blue ocean and a new fresh space. And I think you got to start with the context, because that's the reality of what's on the ground right now, right? But then you also want to unleash your people into that, like, hey, what can we do that would be really different now, and building on our strengths. And sometimes it's also, there's a framework that I'll be teaching, which is reducing, the REEC framework, where you're reducing some things that you're offering, you're eliminating. That's super scary. But then you're raising, right? And then you're creating. And so that
I
gets
love
you.
the phrase that I've heard, or the saying I've heard before, is that strategy is both what you do and what you don't do.
The don't do is, I have found, can be really difficult, because we know from the cognitive scientists that there is a tendency, there's this sort of loss aversion. So if I give you a $1 mug and you got that mug, and then I say, okay, Kathy, I'm going to give you $5, you give me the mug, you're like, I'm not taking that $5. I'm sticking with this is my mug.
Yeah.
We've always done it this kind of way. So that's a tough one.
Or we
But
started it and it looks like failure if we stop it, even though it's not a great return. So yes, yeah. And so I think we see a lot of that here, and part of it is getting over the fear of changing from the things that we've always known, the things that are comfortable to us, and knowing it's okay. We can't grow if we don't change. We can't pick up something new. It's like having things in your hands. Unless you set something down, you don't have any capacity to take something up new.
Those open hands. And, corporate culture has to go through a change. And I think Erie's probably already halfway there or perhaps more, which is we've had too cutthroat a culture, and it's just not going to help us in the future. One of the metaphors, I love metaphors because they kind of open your mind to think different ways. Strategically, it's a great way to think, it's just visual in a different part of your brain. So one metaphor is the kind scientist. So that's somebody who can say, yeah, well, I think you've missed this point, but it's not a gotcha moment. It's more of the data is saying something different from what you're saying. Kathy, can we look at this data? And it's that kind, and that takes, well, for most of us, that takes some mindfulness, right? Because, we get a dopamine hit with like, gotcha, you got that wrong, and it's like, okay,
Well,
yeah.
and I will say one of the other things that happens is we confuse kind for nice. So if I'm just being nice, I'm not even going to say that maybe you should have thought about this, or ask if you thought about this, or even point out that maybe there's another thing to think about. If I'm just, I'm
Absolutely.
going to say, great job, and maybe after the meeting, I'm going to talk to somebody else and say, can you believe they didn't think about that? And so nice becomes not helpful, right?
Yeah.
Kind, kind and critical in the way, I mean, kind is often being, critical is often a kindness. Offering a critique is often a kindness, because you've given people some information that they didn't have.
Kathy, you're singing my song, because those moments, we've all been in the meetings, and your thought process is, oh, wait a minute, this manager is getting too defensive. And when you get defensive, you're losing the room, right? And you want to be like, hey, time out, just take a deep breath, be open to this. And that's a risky thing to do, because, oh, wait, I'm losing face if you say I'm being defensive. But sometimes when you have a group of people, yourself,
Yeah.
how much does it cost? If you look at everybody's salary, you got 20 people in the room and you're discussing this thing, maybe you're trying to save face for that person by not calling them out, but what are you losing in terms of what you can grapple with? And
Right.
there's ways to do it. And I think, I like to look at some good corporate models. And here in LA, we've got Netflix, and Reid Hoffman has, this kind of altruistic candor. You really have to look at your motivation as like, okay, why am I saying this? Am I saying this to make myself look smart, or to,
Right.
be
Versus we all have a vested interest in the right outcome for this project, for instance. So this is not about I'm better, you're better, you have the best ideas, or even I'm attacking you. Just like, let's focus back on what do we all want? What's the outcome we're all after, even though we sometimes have to have some friction to get there.
Yeah, and I think about the insurance industry, and I think about what does insurance industry do for me, for example, as an individual and a consumer of insurance? It creates a sense of trust, right? Like, I'm going to be okay. I'll live in California. We got the wildfires. We got a lot going on, as everyone does, right? And we're seeing this, and that trust. So that is, in some ways, the brand of the industry. So how can you create that trust within your own work groups, where it's like, yeah, we do sometimes mix it up. And, and I gotta say, men sometimes are more accustomed to that, where it's like, hey, we can duke it out in the meeting, and then
Go have
we're
a beer.
Yeah, we're backslapping afterwards. It's all good. And women sometimes we're like, wait a minute, really? Like, does that work? And yeah, it does. It really does. And
Women are more likely to say after, are we okay? Are we all right? We okay? Yeah, good,
yeah,
good.
you got to check in with us a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I like to think of these, great examples in CEOs. Tim Cook from Apple, when he first came on to Apple, he was, he was not came on as CEO. He was already in Apple for years,
Sure.
and he was groomed for that position. And so once he was in the CEO seat, he was known for asking a lot of questions in very long meetings. So there would be like these 2-hour meetings, and Tim Cook would be lots of questions. And people were very intimidated by that at first because they're like, okay, these are gotcha. Like, what's he trying to do here, right? And then after a while, they start to relax because they could see these are sincere questions. He's trying to figure this out. And I think when you can really encourage people, hey, you can think things through out loud in a meeting. That's helpful to us. You don't, the old idea, you have to come with your solution. I get it. I get it. You want people to be solution oriented, but at the same time, you're like, I haven't got this figured out. And if you only talk about the things that you've got figured out, then you're really in trouble
Right.
because it's the things that you're grappling with that you can bring that collective learning. And yourself, human nature, theory X, theory Y, most of us love to learn. We love, so it's making it safe for people to do that.
Yeah, I had an executive that I worked with once who liked to ask a lot of questions, and it could be could feel very intimidating. And I said, because he was usually the top person in the room, but would ask a lot of questions. And I knew from working with him that it was just curiosity. He really, wanted to know, but his manner felt a little bit more intimidating. And I said, always preface it with, help me understand. Help me understand why we do it this way instead of the way we did it before. Help me understand why it's going to cost this much. Help me understand what this will do for us in the long term. And that was a great empathy connection, so that people weren't just feeling like, why does it cost this much? What's this going to get for us?
Right, right. And when you have that kind of rapid fire thought process, some of us are like that. I'm a bit like that. I've had to learn to tone it down a little bit, because I'm like, as a strategist, I'm always like, hey, I want to hear something new. Don't tell me what I already know. So I'm like driving at the things that I don't know. But I think the way you do it makes a difference. And just creating that opening. And, the word that comes to mind, which I think is a word that would resonate with your people, is humility, right? It's like there's a certain element of humility. I have not got this all figured out. Teach me, let me, I want to know what you know on this. I'm not seeing that. Okay. So what am I missing here?
Yeah. Our current CEO is a great role model for that. He is very humble, and he often will use questions and things. He likes to drive to consensus. Not very, I would say, not as usual a way in business, right?
It's not, unless you're in Japan,
Right.
right? That's a little more time consuming. However, as you know, you've got the buy-in when people
Right.
can really, hey, I'm grappling with this. I don't really see this as working. And
Right.
I always think it's a warning sign. I remember I was working with actually a university, and it was a private university in the Midwest, and I started the strategy process, and it was like this, it was just that university. We're just working with the leaders, and the president came in and to the session and was very defensive. And the attitude was, if there's anything wrong with our strategy now, that means I haven't done a good job 5 years ago when I instituted this. And I mean, I tried my best to work with that because That is a huge obstacle. You have to, we've learned a lot from, you guys are using the agile methodology. We've learned a lot from Silicon Valley and how they do things there. And not everything is great, but there's the ethics part is a little questionable these days. But I think there's been the lean startup methodology, right? And so now it's not just about startups, it's about whatever new initiative you're doing. And a lot of that is like fail fast and be willing to see, where you've made a mistake and be willing to correct that course rapidly, actually, because there's not that much time. And that's what the agile, I'm sure, is doing for you. But that's not comfortable for everyone. And for those, I mean, we were thinking of doing a little assessment of some personality, the big five, and there's some who find that very threatening. Well, that's okay, as long as they recognize that and can partner with people in their team who are more comfortable with it and let them lead with some of that. And then you get this experience of like, oh, okay, now I get it. But it has to be sincere from the top, and you know that. I mean, it really has to be a sincere, not a gotcha culture. And I was so happy to hear one of my questions in the previous meeting was, had there ever been layoffs that I should know about? And it's like, no, Erie doesn't do that. And I'm like, okay, so
Yeah,
that's
never in our
powerful.
almost 100-year history. Yeah, yeah.
That is so powerful in creating. So you're ahead of the game in that sense, creating that atmosphere of trust. But I believe in the idea of you have your comfort zone, right? And just a nudge, and that's my job, is to nudge people a little out of their comfort zone. And it's not like, hey, you got to jump off this cliff, base jumping or whatever it is. No. This is more about just getting a little, what can I do today that's a
Yeah.
little uncomfortable for me? Because some of these things are a little uncomfortable, but what does it look like if I try that?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. I think I love the toolkit approach. I think this will be very valuable for our people who are, sometimes we need a little nudging and we know it.
Right.
But it can be nice to have someone from the outside come and give us the little shove.
Well, and I think, my brand also I hope, tends to be inspiration. I like to inspire people and to empower people. It's very important for me as a woman strategist to feel that I can empower people who maybe don't fit the mold of what they think a strategist. They don't have the corner office. Okay, but yeah, maybe I could do this. And one of the things I'm very comfortable with innovation, but I'm well aware that even that word is can get some people like, kind of feel stressed out. Innovation, oh goodness, that means I have to learn one new thing. But with the blue ocean strategy, what I try to do with that is I try to kind of break it down into a methodology. So it's no longer like, oh, I got a Steve Jobs personality. This is going to be insanely great. No, it's more about, hey, maybe I am a little bit on the timid side with innovation. Okay, what are the steps? Where do I start? And I think if you can break it down into some of these steps, okay, so first thing I look at is what can I reduce? Okay, next thing I look at the competitors, and then you got the ball rolling because people have a wellspring of information in their mind, but it's like, okay, they're not thinking, what can I draw from? So hopefully what I'll be doing is nudging, but also inspiring. I really believe that leadership, which is recruiting volunteers, that's, getting people to sort of voluntarily say, okay, I could do this a little differently. I think I can do this.
We refreshed our values over the past few years. They align with capabilities and where we're headed, our aspirations. But as part of the refresh, one of our values in action is called Pioneer What's Next. And pioneer is a culture word for us.
Mm.
The idea of Pioneer What's Next is a way to take innovation to, even just to the basic processes and questions we're asking day to day. And so we have a part of that, I mentioned part of that employee, all that enterprise goal for 2024 is also about expense management. So one of the things that many of us are talking about is, okay, well, we may not be able to reduce dollar expenses, but can we create efficiencies by thinking about our processes differently? Or even as we talked about before, what are some things that maybe we need to let go so we can work on, so we can work on things that might provide more value or have better alignment to corporate goals?
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a seesaw, you know, because when you can, as you're eliminating some things or just reducing the intensity of, you know, maybe what you're providing, but also to have those new offerings, or also to, because it's porting those savings, whether it's time or money, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
just one less thing on your plate that you're thinking
Yep.
about. But where's that going into the seesaw where you're getting some of these new things? And I think, you know, again, going back to the motivation piece, people have to see that there's some wins here, right?
Yeah.
I have to,
Sure.
maybe the customer's more, oh, really? You're doing that? That sounds interesting, you know, or maybe just get some sort of street cred, like, oh, Erie's doing, you know, and that's where people get motivated, where it's like, you know, just the, you know, it's kind of like a diet thing. I mean, who gets excited about dieting? But then when you start learning some new recipes or some new ways of combining, you know, like all those people who go, one of my friends, she loves the recipes on Instagram. And so she says that she, you know, every week we do these little videos when Marco Polo's to each other, and she goes, oh, I've discovered this new thing, you know, with, you know, this ingredients and that ingredients, which you've never thought of putting together.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, oh, I love it, right? So it's, you really got to motivate people with some of the shiny new objects too, because that are wins, that are actually meaningful. And as you said, you know, when you try out some new things, or as you implied, some are not going to be that interesting to the customers. And that's the lean startup method is, you know,
Right.
you got to be willing to say, you know what, people don't really care about this. We thought it was the coolest idea, but not really getting traction. So we're not going to waste our time on that. We're willing to say, hey, you know, we thought it was good, but it's okay.
Yeah. Trying.
I think having that seesaw where you got some of the wins, get them motivated. And, you know, different team members are motivated different ways. And some folks are more certainty based. Some are more love the new thing. And those who are certainty based, as long as they know that they can unleash those around them that are more like, you know, willing to go with some of those new ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you can see, I get excited about this stuff, Kathy.
It's good. It's good. It's all
Yeah.
good. I feel like I've gotten a lot of it, and I'm hungry for more. So
Okay, well, that's definitely what we want to do. And I think there's just a lot of power to working with one company where we can create an atmosphere of trust, where we can talk about the pain points. We've got to be able to talk about that, whether it's customer pain points or employee pain points. Here's the thing that, you know, really demotivates me. Here's the things that customers are frustrated about. Here's how I lost this business because they saw this with someone else and we're not doing that. And you got to have those conversations. You can't be like that president who came charging in and saying, no, we can't talk about anything wrong with the strategy plan. It's like, okay, well, that's going to be a tough one, right? To make progress.
yeah, we are doing, and we have started and have implemented a continuous listening approach, I would say.
Oh my God.
We had done annual, I would say, engagement surveys for a number of years, but now we're doing, in addition to that, we're doing pulse surveys. This is more internal with our employees. We have other feedback mechanisms with our agents and customers as well, but internal to employees, we're doing these pulse surveys as well as listening sessions in between each of the pulse surveys to help really drive those conversations and understanding, and then look at, okay, what are some things we can do from that, whether it's, you know, if leaders are having a pain point around critical conversations, for instance, or difficult conversations. Well, can we offer some training in ways that are relevant to them? Because we've all got all kinds of training we're exposed to, but what else do they need that will really help address things like that? So, I think a lot of the things that you're mentioning are really going to resonate well with our leaders and our employees.
That's great. And I do a graduate course it's not in our MBA program, it's in the MSLM, the Masters of Science in Leadership and Management. And it's on conflict management and organization change, right? Because you don't have the change without conflict. And conflict, as you know, it comes from differences. You want to embrace those differences. And again, when you have a very competitive mindset or I got to look good mindset, then you really can't discuss those differences in a productive manner. But your customers are changing very rapidly. I'm sure the profiles of who is buying the insurance, et cetera. And so having that ability to really have a little bit of conflict. I love that course because the students get the leadership students, they get empowered in their personal life and their professional life because conflict is scary in both realms, right? And how can I learn some tools? And the 10 words or less version of that course is there's one best way to deal with conflict, which is the win-win collaborative approach. That's the one that gets you the farthest. And by the way, how do you get there? And we know there's a bit of a science to how you get there. It's by looking at the larger number of ideas. When you have binary, it's either this or that, then you get into some hardcore competition. But when you're willing to, okay, let's expand that. Okay, not just two, maybe there's some other ways of looking at it. What are some other ways we could look at that? And when you have a larger set of options, that's when you can really start to combine them. And I love, living here in LA, we've got a lot of the fusion cooking, right? So the food trucks, you've got the, Korean kimchi and the tacos and people love it. Well, sometimes it's putting those ideas together in a different mix can get you that win-win. And the other thing is I really encourage people to sometimes look beyond their own industry. What are they doing in XYZ industry? And how can we port that? That's when you really get some exciting ideas too, right? That's the
Love that creativity, that creative collaboration. We talk about that a lot here.
Oh, I love it. Well, you folks this is going to be a really fertile session because I'm just going to build on all the things that you're doing. And I think what will be perhaps different in some ways is just that focus on the strategic thinking toolkit. So they'll have this, little toolkit that they can be like, oh, wait, what did I learn in that training about, the blue ocean reduced.
And I always like to tell people, whatever you're learning, you can apply it most of the time to your personal life and your professional work as well. I mean, we have problems that need solutions and need creativity, whether we're raising teenagers, deciding what to do about retirement, or figuring out what age do I need to move to a ranch, ranch house, not a ranch.
Okay.
Yeah,
like we have here in California. I'm in one of them.
No, I'm not going to a ranch. But I mean, I just think those things, just like life changes and things, change management can help us think about how to embrace life changes too. So even if you may think, okay, I'm not sure how this aligns with the work that I'm doing, I'm not really in a role. Well, we all can benefit from having strategic thinking skills, tools that we can apply in different aspects of our life. So
I just love that because I do think, and call me a little bit of a nerd, but I do think some of these business principles really can be translated into, you look at portfolios of business and then you look at the portfolios in your life. Well, there's your community, there's your couple life, there's your parent life, there's your,
right.
self-care life. Where's my investment going, right? So you've
been looking at my vision board, haven't you?
Very nice. I love it. I have been. Yep.
Yes,
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing some of the changes. And I do want to say one quick thing. One last thought on, I just want to pick up on something you said. Life changes. So in my role as a strategy professor here in California, at University of Laverne, we're getting more and more of the adult student. And I've been thinking deeply about teaching adults and how it's different. And it's actually it's like self-teaching in some ways because they come with so much experience. I love it. But one of the things that I can really help people with, or we can help people with, is going through those transitions. What does it look like? Because you have a new social role at different stages in your life. Age and stage, right? And it's just not always age. It might be something you're doing differently. And how do you kind of reconfigure that and make that something that is not scary? Because, we know that as, you have a lot of long-term employees at Erie, they have a lot of wisdom and depth of experience. And then you got some of the newer folks, and they're coming in with a frothy mindset, right? And that, wanting to prove themselves. And how can you kind of mix those two? Part of it is by giving them the self-awareness. Hey, that's what I bring to the table. I bring some of that wisdom piece, and you got to make sure you're not the person who said, oh, we tried that, didn't work, not wanting to be that person, but saying, hey, here's what some of the obstacles we prioritizing your wisdom because you're at a different stage in life and you're offering something different. So I've been thinking deeply about what you call nimble learning. I'm thinking about the adult learner navigating transitions in their life and their social role and how they present and all those things changing. How can we help them? And strategic thinking is absolutely the way to do it. It's a bit my bias because that's what I do. I just wanted to show you, if you permit me, this is my latest baby. This is Mindfulness for Authentic Leadership Theory in Cases. I am just finishing a practitioner-oriented version of that book. That book is a research book. It's kind of hardcore research. But your folks will have a practitioner version of a portion of that. And that looks at, some of these things like, the self-awareness piece. So it's kind of mixing the leadership and the strategy. Because for your folks to be motivated about strategic thinking, how's that going to affect their role as leaders in the organization? And so I'm kind of known for the left foot, right foot, the strategy thinking, the leadership piece, and how do those go together?
Sounds great. We can't wait.
All right.
What a great conversation. I am so incredibly thankful to have Kathy, your time for this great interview, and Dr. Kelly for you spending this time learning more about Erie from a couple different perspectives today. And I know it's going to be a great program as part of the series. So again, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. And hopefully you're ready to sign up for her program on May 15th. So we look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you guys so much.
Great. See you on the 15th, May 15th. All right.